In the shadows of St. Paul's Cathedral, candles quiver. Noble courtiers barely hush their whispers, and all eyes lock on a tiny girl struggling to take her next step. This isn't a fanciful fairy tale. It's the nightmarish reality of medieval royalty. And at the center, little Isabelle of France, sent down an aisle toward a man more than 4 times her age, who's about to call her wife. It's hard to imagine, but in the next few minutes, you're going to dive deep into one of history's most unsettling secrets, proof hidden away for centuries in dusty ledgers and private letters, evidence medieval chroniclers dared not reveal, about what really happened when children became pawns in a ruthless game for crowns. And here's what makes this story even more chilling. This didn't happen in some far-flung lawless time or place. This was London. This was Paris. This was civilization at its height. Let's go back, November 9th, 1389. Somewhere in the cavernous Louvre Palace, a king screams. Not a cry of joy, not agony from battle, but a terror that he, the most powerful man in France, has become made of glass. Charles VI, known through history as Charles the Mad, cowers from imaginary assassins, convinced even the lightest touch could shatter him to pieces. Meanwhile, down another corridor, Queen Isabeau of Bavaria delivers a 4th daughter, a newborn already marked as currency for a future transaction. They call her Isabelle. From her very first breath, her value isn't measured in warmth or love, but in the alliances she might someday purchase. Pause here for a moment. Think about your memories at age 6, learning to ride a bike, maybe starting school. Your biggest worry keeping up with classmates. For Princess Isabelle, her world was entirely different. Her dolls were tiny courts, her fairy tales manuals in negotiation and etiquette. Everything was training, prepping her for a future where her feelings or childhood wishes simply didn't count. But how did it come to this? The answer lies in the tragic heart of the French royal family. Charles VI hadn't always been lost to madness. Once he'd led armies, commanded respect. Then at just 24, during a military campaign, something inside him broke. He attacked his own soldiers, started seeing threats in every shadow. From then on, his reason flickered on and off like candlelight. Some months, he played the role of proper monarch. Other times, he'd strip and run howling through the halls, forgetting not just his kingdom, but his own children. And as the king weakened, the palace filled with schemers. No one benefited more than Isabeau of Bavaria, Isabelle's mother. While her husband's mind slipped away, Isabeau seized influence and riches. Rumored to take lovers with the king just rooms away in his despair. Medieval chroniclers, paid handsomely to keep the image of nobility untarnished, couldn't even hide their disgust. Her jewels mattered more than her children, pleasure more than prayer. This was the motherhood Isabelle had, not hugs and bedtime stories, but whispers of betrayal and cold calculation. Isabelle grew up threading her way through a palace more weaponized than a battlefield, with the court splintered into the bloody Armagnac and Burgundian factions. Poisonings, backstabbings, and assassins were daily terrors. Children played beneath arrow-slit windows, concrete gardens guarded by men scanning for any sudden movement. Isabelle saw signs of her father's madness before she could even spell her name. The darting eyes, the trembling hands, the stifling silences before he erupted. She was just 4 when she saw him try to hurt her mother, convinced by his hallucinations that Isabeau was a demon. And here's a detail historians usually muffle. The French kept scrupulous expense records. Hidden in those scrolls is an entry from 1394. The crown ordered iron bars for little Princess Isabelle's bedroom, not to keep anyone out, but to stop a 5-year-old from leaping to her death. Imagine, alone, trapped, with death seeming preferable to the life she endured. Even now, it's hard not to shudder. Her suffering was only a prologue. By the time Isabelle turned 6, a new horror loomed. Messengers from England arrived. Richard II, widowed and desperate, with an empty treasury, rebellious lords, and no successors, needed a solution. France had one. Peace, money, and 30 years' truce, all in exchange for one living treaty, a child bride. The negotiations that followed were monstrous. Grown men squabbling in lavish halls, determining when a little girl would be shipped off, as if bartering over livestock. Even by medieval standards, 6 was obscenely young. The English hesitated. Then the French made their pitch. Give Isabelle early, and Richard could mold her to his liking. She could be separated from everything she knew, grow up learning only what her older husband desired. They didn't even disguise the grooming in it. The dowry was eye-watering. 800,000 livres, enough to run England for 2 years. The marriage contract, still sealed in archives, left a particularly evil loophole. Although consummation was to wait, Richard would get all other marital rights immediately. Control over where she lived, what she learned, and yes, the power to share her bed, as nobility believed young wives should grow accustomed to a husband's presence. The ink on that deal might as well have been written in blood. When they finally explained to Isabelle she was to be Queen of England, she asked the only logical question for a 6-year-old. Can I bring my dolls? Let that sink in. Despite all the gold and grandeur, she was just a child, scared, lonely, still clinging to whatever comfort was left. The wedding planning was a triumph for everyone except the bride. Seamstresses stitched together dresses fit for a crown, but in sizes suitable for a first grader. Her mother, cold in her affection for living children, micromanaged every detail, because this union made Isabeau the winner, her value realized with every gold-embroidered sleeve. The journey from Paris to Calais must have felt as endless as her fears. 2 weeks of isolation, hunger, sleeplessness, and clutching a wooden doll until her hands went raw. The handover was as tense and heartless as any hostage exchange. English nobles took the sobbing girl, exchanged diplomatic words in Latin she couldn't understand, and Isabelle of France became property of the English crown, not just in name, but in every practical, heartbreaking sense. What happened next obliterates any fairy tale tropes. The English instantly separated Isabelle from everyone and everything familiar. Her governess, her ladies-in-waiting, even the promise of her little dog. She was alone in a foreign land, surrounded by strangers, celebrating her arrival for reasons she couldn't possibly make sense of. Later, Isabelle confided she truly believed she was being led to her execution. The London wedding? It was spectacle. Spectacle hiding trauma. Every rich tapestry, every feast table, Every medieval Instagram moment was built atop the suffering of a terrified child, dragged up the aisle by two women just to keep her upright. The new queen's crown had to be adjusted constantly so it wouldn't fall off her tiny head. When the archbishop asked for her consent, Isabel's voice was little more than a ghost's whisper. The nation cheered. She wept, her tears lost in the revelry. The bedding ceremony? Even the era's norms paused in the face of how inappropriate this was. Royal traditions were tweaked. Isabel was set up at Windsor Castle, surrounded by a specially chosen French-speaking staff. Richard visited her often, not as a husband in the fullest sense, but the debate lingers. Was it genuine care? Was it grooming? Or something else? He brought her toys, books, and a white pony named Blanche. He was protective, even affectionate. But here's the hard truth. A gentle captor is still a captor. A kind predator is still a predator. However pretty the lies. Life moved forward, disturbingly routine. She appeared in public, recited English poetry, performed dances for ambassadors. Never allowed to be a child behind closed doors. Only an exhibit on a political stage. All the while, Isabel was racked with homesickness and loneliness, clinging to small comforts, shrinking at every reminder she would never see home again. Now, if you think that's the worst it gets, you're mistaken. There's more, so much more, hidden in letters, court whispers, banquet scandals. But before we go deeper, if you feel the weight of Isabel's tragedy and want to uncover more buried truths like these, this is the perfect moment to make sure you're following along so you don't miss what comes next. There's a reason these stories were erased for centuries, and once you start seeing them, history never looks the same. Back in France, the world burns. Charles VI slipping further into madness. Isabeau ever more corrupt. The money used to buy peace is squandered in England on vanity projects. Isabel, just 7, receives carefully censored letters and writes her own, pleading not to be forgotten, stared that even her parents have erased her from their hearts. Then, in the blink of an eye, it's over. Richard II is overthrown. He dies in captivity. Murder or starvation, we may never know. Isabel, barely 10 years old, wakes as queen, goes to bed as a political problem. The new king, Henry IV, can't send her home. The dowry's gone, but can't keep her either. In the cruelest twist, Isabel is locked away in a stately guest house. Forbidden visitors, forbidden home, forbidden hope. Her letters from this period are heartbreaking. Tiny windows into a soul fading behind gilded bars. I speak to the walls in French so I don't forget the sound. I am forgotten by all. They say you are dead, but I do not believe it. You promised you would protect me always. Those words were never mailed. Found later, yellowing in her abandoned room. A child's desperate hope for rescue that never came. Henry IV tried and failed to solve the Isabel problem, authoring his own son's hand in marriage this time. She refused with a courage beyond her years. I am Richard's widow. I will marry no English prince. And with that, she won herself a new kind of imprisonment. But Isabel had grown up learning royal games better than most. She smuggled messages, built alliances, and bided her time. It was only when her father had one of his rare moments of clarity that the French court demanded her return. In 1401, at 13, Isabel finally crossed the sea home, forever changed. Home wasn't a paradise waiting to welcome her. France was at war. her family broken. Her mother only saw her as a diminished asset on the marriage market. Yet, for a fleeting moment, Isabelle found something resembling happiness. At 15, married to Charles, Duke of Orléans, a kind, poetic soul, close to her own age. They had a daughter, Jeanne. Isabelle, finally, briefly, was able to love and be loved. But years of trauma, malnutrition, and emotional agony had taken their toll. Shortly after her daughter's birth, Isabelle fell fatally ill. On her deathbed, at just 20, she asked only to hold her baby one last time. Stay with that image for a moment. A life stolen before it could really begin. Her death got 3 brief lines in the court records. No mention of the suffering, the loss, or the damage left behind. So why does Isabelle's story still matter today? Because hers was not an isolated tragedy. Her life is a key, unlocking the hidden truth behind every castle-dwelling, princess-loving fantasy we see on screens or read in books. This world ran on the trafficking and exploitation of children. She was one among many, her pain recorded only because just enough people left traces in the archives. For every Isabelle, there were hundreds, girls married off at impossible ages, their suffering erased. And every time we romanticize medieval courts or idolize noble marriages, we risk erasing these victims all over again. Next time someone sighs over chivalry and courtly love, remember the little girl who just wanted to bring her dolls. The child whose freedom, hope, and life were all signed away for political gain. Isabelle's short, tragic life is a reminder. The real terror of the Middle Ages wasn't dragons or witches, but powerful people in fine clothes, systematically destroying innocence and calling it diplomacy. Remember her, not as a pawn, not as a princess, but as the child no one protected. And if Isabelle's fate stirs something in you, buckle up. I'm about to tell you how another royal bride, Catherine Howard, faced an ending even more grisly, and the evidence I found may change everything you know about her so-called crimes. Hit that subscribe and notification bell so you won't miss it. I promise, history's secrets only get darker from here. Fade out with a lingering shot of a small, worn wooden doll lit by a single flickering candle.